you're spending your time avoiding fights, trying to figure out how to get along with people, how to get up and learn, and you're figuring out how to play sport with these people, be teammates with these people, and that's life, right? They're the skills that we need today. And the more and more we speak, the more and more I think I realise how fortunate I was at my school, which was on paper just a pretty standard state school in Essex in the UK. But I think that's what it set me up for. Those were the frameworks that set me up for life, and those relationships, connections with teachers and my mates, as I said, was everything.
What do you remember most about school? For Tom Pountney, it was the fun of community, sport and friendships, and the first time he felt treated as an adult. From teacher relationships in Year 10 and 11 to the social rituals of leaving school, those years shaped the way he saw learning, independence and the world.
After school, Tom followed a path into higher education, completing an English degree in Bristol, while also editing the student newspaper Laura. He went on to work as a sports and lifestyle writer in London, travel the world and move into communications and PR with the Mayor's Fund for London, working with Boris Johnson. A move to Australia with his wife Flick marked a new chapter. He's been raising 3 kids and building a branding, communications, marketing and coaching agency from the ground up.
In this conversation, Tom reflects on what school prepared him for, the influence of growing up in a family of teachers, and how his definition of success has shifted from chasing career milestones to creating opportunities for himself and his family. This episode is especially relevant for parents choosing schools or supporting their children through secondary education. Tom's perspective highlights the importance of soft factors, confidence, connection, hobbies, travel and opportunities over the hard factors of results, reputation and alumni names. Welcome to this episode of More Than a Score.
Woo!
Is that your thing?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm a woo girl. Is that what I am?
I think you are.
I am. I'm a hype man. That's what I am.
Yeah, I think call yourself that over a woo girl.
Nah, I don't purposely break the scripts. I'll be the hype girl. Hype man. I'll be the hype man. We are very lucky to have the wonderful Tom Pountney here. Thomas Pountney. I'm going to say Tom Pountney.
Tom's good. I'm just happy you pronounced my surname correctly.
Well, I'm very. That's a good
How
start.
do people pronounce it other than that?
We get a lot of Pountney,
Pountney,
which makes all the kids laugh.
Yeah.
okay. Not poutine.
Don't get that. Get Putney. I've had all sorts.
Okay. Well, today, guys, we're very thrilled to have a guest who's as much a deep thinker and creative spirit as he is a dedicated, community-focused kindness warrior, a traveller, adventurer, originally from the UK, as you might have heard just hearing his voice. Tom Pountney isn't just your average storyteller. He's someone who sees the world with both heart and insight. He's also a proud parent of 3, and he brings a really thoughtful, compassionate approach to everything he does, highly creative, and a person that I really look up to as a dad, and I'm so glad we could finally get you onto the pod. Thomas Pountney, thank you for joining us on More Than a Score.
I feel like after that there needs to be like a round of applause or something. That was like a big intro.
Oh, thanks, Laura. I've been working on it.
Yeah.
Or did ChatGPT? Right.
No, that was me. That was me.
Well, thank you, mate. I was going to say thank you before I made that joke, because I know that jokes get made in nervousness and we're not always good at receiving such kind words. So thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
Absolute pleasure, mate.
And thanks for having me on the podcast.
Oh, of course.
So, Dan, I'm excited.
Well, we are very excited. And one of the things we do at the start is you can take this in any way you would like. But one of the questions we normally like to start with is when you think back to the end of school and your time in education, were you happy with your score?
So this needs some context. I went to a UK state school for high school, and our scores, I don't even remember anything about a score. I don't remember. There were grades. Look, there were GCSEs. There was A star through to fail.
What's A star? Just for all the people here, maybe in Australia or in other contexts that don't know what A star means.
You can't put it against a score. That's the thing. So it's not that it's something that is an opinion or anything like that, but you can't rate it against a score necessarily. So it's a difficult one to measure. But for me, look, I couldn't even tell you what grades I got. And that wasn't because I didn't care. I did care. But for me, it was passage through education. And that was that. It didn't really have huge relevance in my world. And whether that was my upbringing, whether it was my personal sort of thought process, I don't know. But it didn't have huge relevance. It was basically, hey, can we get what we need to get to keep going and go where we want to go? And that was as far as it went in measuring results.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it's, for you, it wasn't about the score. It was about, you said passage. Talk us through, when you think of some key moments during that passage through school, like what's one of the first ones that jumps in your mind? Because one of the words you said was school was really fun. And the fact that it was about community. So talk us through, what are some of the key moments of that passage that you remember?
Yeah, look, and I'll reference, as I said off air just before, that I really enjoyed the sort of pre-questionnaire, which is where I think you got the word fun from. Look, it was fun. I was fortunate. I was around my mates who were like-minded, and I didn't realise I was in a bubble until I got out of it. But hey, it was fun in that bubble. Just guys my age, mostly guys, some girls, but mostly guys. It was a co-ed school, who just loved sport, loved adventure, loved fun, and we just got to explore life and relationships together in a literal and metaphorical playground every day. So yeah, it was a happy time. It was a school that my parents had moved to the area so that my elder sisters could attend, and then I did, but it was just the catchment area. There weren't any other sort of qualifications you needed to get into that particular state school. It was performing fairly well at the time, had some pretty good leadership, but it was just like, look, there were days that I hated, and the homework and the coursework like everyone else, but it was just great. And that was through to year 11 at the high school, which is 16, and then the passage that I referred to earlier was into what we called further education, before higher education and university. And further education for me, although there was what was called a sixth form college at the high school, my choice was to go into the local town and go to the sixth form college there, where you were treated far more like an adult, and it was like a real perfect prelude to university, because there wasn't so much pressure around showing up. If you didn't want to show up, you didn't show up. There was real kind of personal dependence on learning, which just created a really just fun environment and a really positive learning experience.
So if we weren't in the UK context, so sixth form would be like equivalent of year 12. You sort of go to a different campus, and that's where you focus on your final high school year before you then move on.
That's it.
Beyond school.
That's it. Yeah. So 7 to 11 was known as GCSEs, I think still is, and then 12 and 13 A levels. There was a nuance with A2 and AS when I was there, but ultimately A levels, which gave you the passage through to university if you wanted. Which at the time there was a big push with the Labour government in the UK at the time to get. They had some pretty interesting figures around the numbers that they wanted to get to university. It was extremely high. And it felt like a conveyor belt in some respects. I think some of my mates in a different era wouldn't have gone to university. They would have maybe chosen different paths, but it was easy. It was fairly cheap, and it was a continuation of the fun. So a lot of us went. I'd put myself in the bracket of someone who probably would have tried to have got to university, however which way I could, but it was certainly a fairly comfortable passage to get there at the time.
We're gonna come up to some further things after the school experience, but I'm still really interested to know, like, what is a really specific moment or a day where there's that fun that happened for you? Because even when you were talking just now, there was a smile on your face when you were looking up, telling us about all this experience. Fun's already popped up about 5 times in the conversation. What does that fun look like when you remember it? Because I'm just trying to think now for our listeners. They would all probably say they want their kids to feel like they're having fun, they're happy, they're enjoying school in some way. So what did that look like for you?
Different at different ages, right? But I think relationships with teachers was key. And I remember starting to build some pretty positive, relaxed relationships with teachers quite early. And again, it was largely through sport, and that wasn't just with the sport teachers. There was an English teacher. I love when you hear people name their teachers from the early years. It's fun. But an English teacher called Mr. Thompson, and I went on to do an English degree. He was a massive inspiration for me, and I use that today in my job. He was a rugby player, and we just had so much fun. Mr. Clark, who looked like Clark Kent as well. Science teacher, second row rugby player. Again, just taught in a different way. And I think as soon as you get out of primary school and you realise that you can have different relationships with teachers, which obviously naturally and organically tends to blossom the later you go in school. But even early on, those teachers that show their personality and are sort of authentic in the teaching space, I think create an environment where you can build relationships with them and alongside your contemporaries who when you say, Dan, what does it look like? It looks like shirts out before school, squeezing in a game of, I'm going to call it football because it's the real football, and squeezing in a game of football with scuffed up school shoes and holes in knees and that turning up to class sweaty and tie all over the place and just running around and having fun and then the kind of leadership opportunities that came through, again, sport and the idea of houses. Like, I loved that we had these houses at schools, which I know whatever you call it, most schools do. And as we're reading Harry Potter with my kids at the moment, the houses are obviously so integral to the whole story. But that real sense of identity, I guess,
and belonging, maybe.
And belonging, exactly. Yeah, is the first foray in life, really, outside of the football team you support or whatever it is, to belong to something outside of your family.
Can I just jump in? There's two things I wanted to bring up in regards to how you spoke about education. One word you used was influential. And the other thing you talked about was you started talking about it then with the teachers, that idea of having agency, that idea of being like another adult in the room. Why were those things so big for you? Or how was education so influential for you?
Look, I mean, we spend a lot of time at school, right? And I should probably say that both my parents were teachers, and my sisters are both teachers in a capacity. So I guess I was, and look, it wasn't always that education was a positive space. I heard the other side of it as well, and that's why I have great respect and empathy often with teachers today, and understanding the workload, and won't go along with the you're basically part-timers kind of rhetoric, because I know how hard teachers work. So therefore, yeah, look, education was influential to me in terms of both around the home and around how much time we spend in the school. But, I think just like, Dan, you and I have talked about this before, but the amount of time we spend at work today is a significant period of our lives. Just as when we were of that age, it was a significant period of our lives that we spent in school. And how amazing that we have these frameworks where we get to learn, like when our brains are sponges and we are so open before we really kind of form our own views. How amazing that we get to be taught things in such a cool environment, and I consider ourselves very fortunate in, quote unquote, the Western world to have such incredible access to education, and it just be something that we take for granted, I think, too often. So yeah, influential. I mean, was education influential to you guys? I think.
Look at you already turning the script, Tom.
Flipping it on us.
Well, we've talked about this already with the fact how I think it's because it's happening in such a formative time, right? Like, I was at university the same amount of time I was at high school, and yet for me, university felt like it was 2 seconds. Where at high school, I feel like there was so much identity building that happened in that time, and the environment is so influential or impactful as you're building your identity. So I think that for that reason, it's influential for me, for sure. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, it's funny. You bring your lens now, right? Like, so I'm thinking back to it, and I know that's from my experience with school and with education in general. Was primary school, I was really bored, so that actually influenced me to think I wanted to be, when I became a teacher, I wanted to be the teacher that really saw kids for who they were, interested, get them engaged. From secondary, it was I actually walked away getting influenced to I don't know, like counterculture, like to sort of do things a little bit differently. So I studied some different art and different, broad range of subjects, but I walked away influenced that you could give things a go, give them a try. Why wouldn't you give them a try? Which I now know is I feel like that's a real privilege from it. And I fully agree with the uni experience, which was, I remember walking out, I was like, oh, this is the real world, and just realizing that there's so many other perspectives and worldviews out there. And I really loved that. So getting the access to that. So it's probably just more so just kept broadening the horizon for me. It's a great question, Tom. Well done. I was just, so listening to you though, what it sounds like school also taught you was, so connection really matters. You walked away valuing feeling connected, being part of this group. Like you've already spoke about feeling a sense of belonging, the importance of houses. I find it really interesting now seeing the work that you do to bring and connect community. I can see some really strong links there. But I guess if you think of that experience at school, what helped you be so well set up to have such a positive experience? I think when I think of the listeners, if they can take away some sort of thing to consider for their own children or people at school, like what are some things that helped you just get the most out of this? Because it sounds like you had a wonderful experience.
Well, look, first of all, I'm impressed that you had time to be bored at primary school. That's obviously, that speaks to your superior.
I had my hand up all the time. Come on, Miss Phillips, just let me answer the question. It was always someone else that got to answer the question.
You were irritating at that point, probably.
Probably, yeah. What do you mean at that point?
Yeah.
I was wondering if it spoke to your time management skills being better than mine, but I certainly didn't have time to be bored at primary school. But it's amazing questioning from you two, and I think it's making me dig deep into my experience. And I think it's just that, and I think of education so closely tied to my social life all the way through. Actually, probably a bit too much socializing at uni, but it's being dumped in this environment, and we had 2,000 kids at our state school, so I think that's considered a relatively sizable school, certainly in these parts. And you're dumped in a situation with all walks of life, and you got to figure out how to get on with people, and that is life. That is, and like I said, I did realize that my friendship group, when I went and did a gap year and between uni and college, and went and did a ski season in France, and only then did I realize that my friendship group, I was in a bit of a bubble, and it was like 10 Tommies kind of thing. We were all the same pretty much. We had slightly different backgrounds and nuances and everything that we brought to the group, and I'm still very good friends with those 10 guys today. But ultimately, I had found my bubble. But those 2,000 kids, you're spending your time avoiding fights, trying to figure out how to get along with people, how to get up and learn, and you're figuring out how to play sport with these people, be teammates with these people, and that's life, right? They're the skills that we need today. And the more and more we speak, the more and more I think I realise how fortunate I was at my school, which was on paper just a pretty standard, probably achieving slightly higher than the average state school in Essex in the UK. But I think that's what it set me up for. Those were the frameworks that set me up for life, and those relationships, connections with teachers and my mates, as I said, was everything.
Yeah.
That was my day.
We're always going to be with people, so being adaptable, knowing how to connect, and realizing that you just need to keep moving on and keep progressing. Yeah. Sounds like they were the key things that really helped set you up.
Yeah, and most days after walking to primary school with my mum, because she did come and teach at my primary school in year 5, you walk to school with your mates, you walk back from school with your mates, mess around in the streets for 2 hours. On the way home from school, you get home at 5:30, 6 some nights, or you're playing soccer in the park, or you're riding bikes, and that was my world. That was everything.
So another thing that's under all that is getting access to lots of different groups or lots of different activities. Sounds like that really helped you thrive too. I'm just trying to think of our listener. So thinking of, sounds like groups, community groups, sport, activities. It sounds like you were really set up to have all these different experiences, to have lots of people around you and lots of different groups.
And just add to that time to play. It feels like you just really created time in your life to play. As you said, having your shirt scruffy, like just sort of showing up without all the pretense, without all the things. Like I just think that that's coming through a lot, is like opportunity to play.
Yeah, and I have to credit my parents and my sisters, I guess, with that, and creating that environment at home that, you didn't have to necessarily go to school looking perfect. And yeah, like, obviously the teachers told you to tuck your shirt in along with the rest of it. But I think, yeah, I come from a fairly, very, very humble family, and in terms of their personality as much as anything, very humble people. And it was just about showing up, having fun, being who you are, and exploring every opportunity. And I think taking opportunities, like you said, Dan, just saying yes to things, So yeah, there were frameworks that obviously you had to do, and then there was additional, because the sports system at the time was, you'd have clubs in my local town, which I played for as well, but you'd have school teams on top of that, so you'd have the duality of both, which meant I was playing rugby most nights through the week as well for one team or another. But that was extracurricular that was available to us, that was managed by not only the sport teachers, in fact not often the sport teachers, it would be the Mr. Thompson, Mr. Clark, the science teacher, the English teacher, who ran those rugby training sessions after school. And now I understand that would have been voluntary, and how incredible that they had the energy and the desire to do that. And then additional things as well, like Duke of Edinburgh is a global thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it happens here.
Yeah. So yeah, that opportunity to go and get a bronze Duke of Edinburgh award and everything that came with that, with community work. And
just quickly, in case someone's listening and they're not familiar with that, in the shortest way, how would you?
Yeah, so you'd run like a 12-week program, and within that program you'd tick off some major buckets. You go out and do some work in the community. You'd maybe support some peers. You'd maybe support some elderly people as well. And then you'd maybe go on a hike, and you go camping, and you'd learn some kind of outdoor skills. And I think you can go and get your, Dan, you've probably got it, but you can go and get your Duke of Edinburgh gold or platinum or whatever it is. But Duke of Edinburgh bronze was a great introduction to that for me. And this idea that why not? Why not? As you said, why not get involved with these great opportunities that were on the table? And the school ran trips as well, both in terms of we actually didn't, school camp wasn't really so much a thing as it is here for me anyway. Like my first school camp I think was in grade 6, and we went to York for like a week, which was like a 6-hour bus journey, and everyone was sick on the bus. But because
6 hours is ambitious.
Yeah, especially having not really done camps prior to that. And then there was school, as we got into secondary school, there was school ski trips and stuff like that. We I couldn't necessarily afford to go on that, but there were definitely opportunities, and it was like, hey, if it's on the table and it's achievable, then as you said, Dan, why not?
All right, let's try and look at your journey beyond school, beyond that foundational type school. So you did an English BA in Bristol. You're then the editor of the student newspaper, writer-editor at Sport Lifestyle publisher, freelance writer. You're now moving into comms and PR, marketing, communication manager at one of Boris Johnson's charities. What did you learn along that journey?
Oh, wow.
It's a lot of things to list off. Like when I start listing it, there's a lot of things you've been doing.
Yeah, it's a journey, and people ask me what I do and what I am today, and I still don't really know. But I kind of figured...
Man about town, I hear, when talking to people. They just describe you as a lovely man about town.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Do they, or is that you, Dick?
Well, I've interviewed at least everyone.
Right. Everyone, at least everyone. Yeah.
Everyone listening, I've interviewed at least 5 people, and I've heard the words "man about town" describing Thomas.
That's definitely ChatGPT. No, I like it. Just driving here to this podcast, I was having a conversation with my business partner, Vari. We have a business called Friday Morning, and we are really still trying to establish what we are. We're only a year old. I partnered up with her a year and a half ago. We call ourselves a branding agency at the moment, but we believe brand goes way beyond what most people think of as conventional brand. And we're a kind of hybrid business partner to people, because between Vari and I. Vari's a graphic designer. She's a published author. She's a business coach and life coach. We have the kind of skills that we think can mold into the perfect business partner for small businesses, local businesses that can essentially pick us up, drop us when they need us, grow themselves, so that we can kind of grow concurrently. And yeah, look, that's a long-winded answer to say that my experience has been fairly organic. I always wanted to be a sports journalist, and it depends on what you qualify as a sports journalist, but I did it at a very low level and immediately realised that it didn't pay much, and I got the buzz of like filing copy on the buzzer as such, but it was way too sensationalist in terms of, I remember you had to give scores for each player in the football teams, and I was giving 4s and 5s, and I got a call from the editor, hey mate, we need 2s and 8s, and I'm like, there were no 2s and there were no 8s. So I don't know, maybe I was too nice for that world. But ultimately, yeah, my journey's been fairly organic in terms of just trying to seize opportunities and find a path to do work that I love, and I've been fortunate enough to achieve that and find myself in a place with a great business partner and a fun business where we are still exploring what people need and what we need to grow together as businesses, really, and organisations, community organisations we work with as well.
So was the goal always, by moving into that BA in English, was that always to be a sports writer? Were you ever thinking of any other type of communication?
No, I didn't really fully understand the world of PR and strategic comms at that point, to be honest. I was always interested in brand, both personal brand and organizational brand, but really, it was about, I just wanted to write. I didn't know how.
But specifically sport?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where my passion still lays today. Although, having said that, I think maybe it was actually just a mask for connection. When I hear a business owner, for example, speak about their business with such passion, that's what I want to communicate to the rest of the world. That's what I want to amplify. And as I go deeper, I realise that it's not just through words that I want to do that, but words and English degree was my entry point into that world.
I wanted to ask you, because there was obviously a course correction. You kind of got into the job you thought you really wanted at that low level. You talked about obviously there being a financial issue there in terms of how much you were able to earn, but you did decide to make a course correction. And I'm wondering, what is it that you have gained through that change in direction?
Great question. I think the world of journalism, the thing that upset me that I discovered when I left uni was that, and I was already aware of this, but I was just at the beginnings of a world of journalism where you had to get a qualification to be a journalist.
Right.
And I didn't like that.
And prior to that, there was no need?
Oh, look, you could. It was out there. But ultimately, the NCTJ, which is the National Council for Trained Journalists, something like that, you weren't really looked at by a news desk unless you had this. So it was the tick box, it was the pass. And I didn't like that. And it wasn't a laziness thing. I did actually start studying the course. It was, for me, a stem of creativity. It was, you've got to write like this. You've got to fit in this box, and you have to run with these formulas. And my brain just doesn't like that. I don't like being put in a box. So I think at that moment I realised that perhaps for the other reasons aforementioned, that wasn't a course that I wanted to follow. I did go on and freelance from that point for a bit, and then I landed a job in London, sports writing, but writing more kind of features, so longer pieces that allowed me to speak to the sports stars and allowed me to go deep into the story and the history. That was longer form writing than kind of news journalism. Career correction probably came by chance afterwards, when I had become probably I'd then moved into being an editor, and I missed writing, essentially.
I was going to say, you just grimaced then when you said the word editor. So why? Why? What happened there?
Oh, look, I enjoy editing, but again, I love a blank page. I love being creative. Yeah. And I think working with other people's words is an incredible skill. A great editor is absolutely priceless. But I wanted to be the person with the blank page, essentially. So it didn't kind of work for me. And so I worked for 5 years at Touchline, which was a publishing agency, and I'm forever grateful to those guys for helping me start my career. I was young. I was 22. I was just out of being editor of my student paper, which I loved. And after the novelty kind of wore off of speaking to these awesome sports stars, the novelty I don't think would have ever worn off, but I got pushed more to stay behind my desk and be an editor. That's at that point I met my wife Flick, and we decided to go and have an adventure in South America for a year and break everything and do things a bit differently. And then I came back and I landed through an opportunity with a family friend, a job with one of Boris Johnson's charities at the time. He was mayor of London prior to being a PM in the UK, and it was an opportunity and a foray into the world of strategic comms, which my mind was blown at that point. And I was like, wow, we can do so much. This blank page just got a hell of a lot bigger, and we don't have to write, we can draw. I can't draw, but we can metaphorically speak.
It's a beautiful metaphor. Yeah.
It sounds like there's been so many different steps, and Loz, such a great question with the course correction shift. If I'm someone listening right now, what have been the skills that you've now realized you've had to dig in really deeply, or you've kept coming back to, that have helped you get the most out of that course correction?
Probably my communication skills, my personal communication skills.
And when you say communication, because it's a really big word to some people, what's under that? Sorry for interrupting.
No, thank you. And this feels very indulgent, but thanks for the opportunity to talk about myself.
What a podcast.
Yeah, no, but you don't get to do it very often. My podcast partner doesn't let me talk about myself. So. I think talking to people. Yeah, for me, communication is talking to people. However which way, whether you're talking to one person, whether you're talking to 50,000 people, that is communication. And Dan, you really struck a chord earlier when you just said, why not? Why wouldn't you speak to somebody? Why wouldn't you? It was at my sister's wedding that I spoke to this family friend who was the CEO of Mayor's Fund for London, Matthew Patton. Just chatting to Matthew, there was a spark. We had a coffee, and I started working on a freelance basis for them, and then on a permanent. It was only 18 months, but it was a really influential 18 months. And Matthew was an incredible person to work for, because he just opened the door for me, not necessarily in terms of a network, but in terms of opportunity, and showing me, hey, the world's out there, go get it. So I'm very grateful to him and to the support that I had from Flick to go chase those opportunities, and from my family and friends as well.
So backing yourself to go talk to someone, I can imagine as well, it's also listening. So it's not just you just talking at them, but also really listening. And then it sounds like as well, you're really backing yourself to then say, well, if there's something here, let's go for it.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, right? It's nervous, it's sweaty, it's shaky. And you're spot on, Dan. Listening, I learned so much from Matthew in that short period of time. Yeah, I listened to him as intently as I could, but also put myself in some pretty uncomfortable positions, and I still do today, and I still get the nerves and get the shakes. But that's for me, that's a buzz. That's a massive buzz. And look, it doesn't always go well. Sometimes it goes badly, and you walk out of those situations and go, yeah, I'd have done that differently if I had the chance again. But, pushing those boundaries and getting yourself out of the comfort zone, I think is really important in life.
Can I ask what situations make you nervous?
I was a bit nervous coming on this podcast, to be
honest. Were you?
Just I guess new situations.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know what you're walking into. Having to strike up conversation with someone, whether it's in a social or professional setting, I still get a little nervous. I think nerves are really a positive thing, and I'm Flick and I are having conversations with our girls about that now, and about testing boundaries.
I think nerves mean you care. That's what I always looked at it as. Like, if you're not nervous, right, you care about something, you want it to go well.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. And I think, it's a sense of you want things to go well for everybody concerned, and that's the kind of people that I'm drawn to. Is to your point, Loz, I think that's a great point, that people who do care, absolutely. And we were just, unlike the millions of other conversations I've had with Melbourneites about coffee, we were talking about coffee off air just before, and what makes, this is a debate for another day, but I'll just put my point across. What makes Melbourne coffee the best is that the cafes care. It's not necessarily the beans, I hate to tell you, but
in my family we talk about your courage muscle. So it's like, about if you, because we're similar, we know that you need to slowly over time, and as an adult I know I've had lots of experiences getting to a point of feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable. But now I can walk in to present or run something and I know I feel nervous, but I see it as excitement because it's a positive risk. But back when I was, I don't know, 7, 8, I remember I'd write down to call up, like if there was a new video game out, calling up like the local store, and I'd have a little script on a notepad to help me, because I was so nervous about having to call up. Whereas now I can go stand on a stage in front and like happily talk. But it's that courage muscle, like it's slowly, just by putting yourself, practicing, developing, you're just slowly strengthening. So yeah, when you're talking about you talking with your girls about ways that you build that up, I could see some connections to that.
Do you still get nervous?
Yeah, but it's funny. I had a swimming coach when I was in high school who used to talk about the idea of what you were saying, Laura, about being nervous versus excited. So if we saw a positive outcome, I see it as a chance I get to do something. It's not that I have to, I get to do this. So I see it as an exciting thing. Whereas if I'm scared, that's very different. I'm scared because there's a potential negative risk. I see as a really different.
Can I ask a question? You're talking about communication. Everything's obviously about communication, but I'd love to know, what does good communication create?
Relationships.
What difference does that make if you've got good relationships?
Greater opportunities for everybody. So, to delve a bit deeper on my answer, relationships, reputation as well, which I've just been writing about, funnily enough, and we've got student-led conferences coming up next week.
We sure do.
3 girls, and it took me back to, they were called parent-teacher interviews in England in my day. I don't know.
They still are. I was doing parent-teacher interviews 2 years ago as a teacher. Yeah, they still are.
And I was there with my mum and dad, and I think one of the pieces of feedback wasn't wholly positive. It would have just been around talking too much, nothing too serious.
The tie not being properly tied up.
Probably, yeah. And Mum said it takes a lifetime to build reputation and moments to break it. And that stuck with me, and I take it into every situation, probably deep in my conscience most of the time, but it's surfaced over the last week or so with the student-led conferences coming up and a few other things. So yeah, I think in answer to your question, communication, transparent, open communication builds trust, builds relationships, builds reputation, builds credibility. And yeah, authentic is such a overused word these days, but genuine authenticity as well.
Strange we have to say genuine authenticity, right? But
just chuck in a couple, right?
Yeah, we do. So given all that, we've touched on so many different things, and particularly right now, so you're saying communication skills, the ability to talk, the ability to connect with people, to really deeply listen, build that trust. Like, they sound really foundational, like key skills. So given all that, what would you tell a parent with a child in high school or about to go into high school? What would you tell them to do more of?
My eldest is 10, so we're starting to think about that transition. What I tell her to go get it, just go get it, just go at it, do what you want. We're here, we're your safety net, we'll catch you if you fall, but go out and climb as high as you can, because why not? There's so many opportunities in this world, and school is just a growing gateway as you progress through school to that world, equipping you with the skills that you want to develop and take into the world so that you can go and get those opportunities. And it's funny, thinking about it again, and perhaps to add to what I feel about school, I was nervous at times. Like, I remember going from primary school, like you said, big fish, little pond, to state school and being like, wow.
And a big state school, 2,000 kids, that's a big state school.
Yeah. And you're there in your oversized blazer, and and you're nervous. Yeah, it was nervous. There were new girls as well, always interesting. So there was definitely nervousness around it as well. But again, I think I look back at that nervousness as a positive experience. But I'd tell Belle, my 10-year-old, go get it, love. You've got this. I stole this from Hamish McLaughlin, shamelessly. He was on a podcast, and his story is incredible. I'd recommend people listen to his Imperfects interview. He went through a really harrowing experience with his daughter, but he tells her every night, you can be whatever you want to be. And thanks, Hamish, I stole that. And I tell my girls every night, you can be whatever you want to be. In fact, most nights I say, just remember, and they say it before I can say it. And I don't care whether they're kind of ridiculing me or not. It's deep-seated in them, I hope, and I hope that that's giving them the confidence to go get it. So when I do pass on that advice, sorry, I've answered your question in terms of me personally rather than telling other parents, but I'd be telling other parents to tell their kids to go get it.
Yeah, I'm very interested to know. So you've spoken a lot about communication, the idea of relationships. At the very start, we're talking about how you're really community focused. So we've covered all of those aspects. So looking forward, Tom, what's a key skill that you're planning on learning or currently learning, and why?
Oh, wow. So AI is a big one, obviously.
Dan's eyes just lit up. Look at him over there.
I knew he would, but he also knows my opinion on AI. So,
what's your opinion on AI?
I think it's let's just continue.
Dan is a huge AI fan.
Early adopter, we'd say.
Yes, early adopter. Yes, just to give context to that.
Yeah, look, there's definitely space in this world for AI, and there's great use for it. I've chosen not to engage so heavily with it to this point, which is a very, very personal opinion. My business partner doesn't necessarily agree. My life partner, Flick, doesn't necessarily agree. But for me, I kind of want to double down on human algorithms, really, which for me is heart, head, and gut. Other stuff. So, look, to answer your question, I might learn AI at some point, but not right now. In terms of other stuff, what is there? I mean, look, there's so much to learn. I've just got back into reading, actually, like reading books. Doing an English degree kind of killed reading for me for a little bit. There was so much to read. And I can't honestly say I've really engaged with books since then. But
the sad thing, I was the same English teacher. So everything I was reading was for work. And so it became tainted by that for a while for me too. So I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for a while there, I was trying to read business books. I was trying to read self-help books, and Flick goes, why don't you just pick up a novel and just enjoy reading again? And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. So I did, and geez, how much is there to learn out there from books and people that write? But I think, I'm all open to, and maybe go back and studying something at some point. Not right now. I don't have the drive to do that. My biggest learning is probably in parenting, and that's probably the biggest scope for me to learn, and just to listen to other people's experiences, whether it's through books or podcasts or just conversations with community people. Yeah, look, mate, in answer to your question, there is just so much for us to learn out there that I think we learn until the day we die, really, and I am just hungry to get out there and understand as much as I can, and to hear as many people's experiences as we can. Literally last week we finished a 2-year project, which was essentially a pretty big coffee table book of a business's journey over 3 generations, and the richness in that, and the life of the matriarch of the family, who's about to turn 90, is just so vast, and being inquisitive and seizing opportunities offers such great learning for all of us, I think. And yeah, like I said earlier, I'm grateful that my upbringing and my early school years opened my eyes to that.
So listening to, there was something that jumped out. So with the reading, are you learning to have fun with reading again?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Laura, we've circled right back to the fun idea. Sorry, Tom, I interrupted you. Sorry, I'm very proud of myself.
He's just like, I've spotted the full circle.
Sorry, Tom.
They're over there.
I jumped in with enthusiasm just
No, it's a great point. Yeah, I think, reading for fun, as Laura touched on, in teaching English and studying English, the fun can be drawn out of these things in situations where you're forced to read. And I remember looking at the bookcase when I finished my degree, and I'd read pretty much exactly 50% of the books on that shelf, or 50% of every book on that shelf. But, you're kind of forced to read. And I'm just watching Bella. In fact, all three of my girls love reading and just love books and just burying themselves in books, which I didn't necessarily do as a kid. I was kind of more outside and chasing bulls, but just watching their energy around books and as I said, reading Harry Potter to them is fun, Dad. Yes.
I reckon there's parents out here that are going, how do I get my kids engaged in books? Do you have any tips on that? Because I feel like there's lots of parents that would be like, it'd be so nice to see my kids reading. How do you think you've created that in your home? That's
a great question, Loz. I think, again, testament to Flick, we've always had so many books around them from day dot, but thinking about it, and Dan, you nailed it when you said make it fun. Doesn't matter what you're reading about. Bella's read a series called Netball Gems. It's it's trash, but that doesn't matter because she loves it. She enjoys it. It's fun. So yeah, make reading fun, because whether it's listening or whether it's reading, how much we can learn through books and people and podcasts and all the awesome ways that we can consume. I hate the word consume content, but that these days. Let's all fall in love with it, and let's encourage our kids to do it in whichever medium it is. And I don't think it matters whether it's audiobooks or reading books, but just to create the time and space for ourselves as adults and for our kids to do that. I think it's as much about the environment as the actual book itself or the content of the book. And we all lead pretty full-on lives, right? But it's about just pausing and saying, hey, it's okay just to do nothing, go pick up a book. And our kids are teaching us that as much as we're teaching them. So it's listening to the direction they want to travel in and encouraging that where it's positive behaviour.
My wife and I are both primary school teachers, so we always used to talk about the idea of, and we do with our kids, about like you read to learn, but then there's also just reading for enjoyment. And then, sometimes kids or adults always think it has to be chapter books, but there's lots of different things that you can read,
Oh, yeah.
Pamphlets, brochures, non-fiction texts, like Guinness World Record books. So we always used to talk to different parents or different people, or what we're doing now with our kids is trying to spot their interests and then see if there's certain formats that they seem to also connect with as well. And then, like what you just said, just surrounding them with different things. And then we try and do it too.
Yeah. Well, Dan and I have this conversation because my children like the reading, but they don't like the administration. So they never fill in their readers at all for school, but they love the reading. And then there's the teacher part of me that's like, oh God, they haven't done the little bits and pieces. But I'm like, what is the focus really?
Yeah. What's
the actual focus? Like, that's to show that they're reading, but I know they're reading, right? And they're enjoying the reading, and that's just become a taxing part of the reading. So I'm like, is it that important to enforce? Maybe not. We've just kind of put my hands up to it.
Flick always wants to fill out the book, and I'm like, hey, I think they know that we're reading at home, and look, it's important to an extent, but we don't have to fill every page, even though we have read something. So yeah, look, the most important thing is that they're reading, right? And that's awesome.
Yeah, discovering new words, new worlds, just ways of thinking, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, look, and my mum was a primary school teacher. She did both, but mostly primary at the end. And I remember her talking about maths and getting breakthroughs with kids around who were just sport nuts. And it's like, okay, you don't want to do maths, that's fine. Let's look at the ladder, how that works. It's maths, right? 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw. Let's look at the table and work it through that way. And it's just finding, as I know you guys as wonderful teachers that you've been and you are, it's finding different ways that get the buzz from different people, right?
Yeah.
Tom, we're very mindful of your time. I just have one more question. Is that okay?
Of course, absolutely.
Right. So what haven't we asked you about that we should have?
It's a good question, Dan.
That is a very good and broad question. Look, the title of your podcast, More Than a Score, I thought that we would have a slightly different conversation to the conversation that we've had. And rightly or wrongly. And I thought that we would be focusing, although we did touch on it at the beginning, around the importance of score. And we haven't touched as much on that as I thought. So am I asking myself a question here?
Do you want us to ask you about that? Well, I think it was really interesting because when we asked you at the very start, you actually spoke about not remembering them and that it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And then you went through, it was more about the experiences and what you actually got out of it beyond the grades, beyond the scores.
Yeah, there was less for us to dig in there, I feel like, about the score because it moved quite quickly away from, unless there's something you want to talk about.
Well, yeah, look, let's go full circle.
And oh my God, Dan is like salivating over there.
Yeah. So my dad was an assistant principal or deputy head, as it was called, fairly big state school down the road, a different school. And he later went on to work on a British government initiative which was called Fast Track, which was essentially making sure that talented teachers were fast-tracked into leadership because there was a shortage of leadership, quality in leadership, let's say. And I remember him saying that he was speaking to Oxbridge graduates, which is Oxford and Cambridge, coming out with firsts from Oxford and Cambridge. So, on paper, the very, very best academic score that you could get in an undergraduate degree. And he just said half of them can't talk. Half of them don't know how to communicate, how to present. They've got this bit of paper that says they're a genius, but there's no way they can go into leadership in a school because they'll get eaten alive. And look, maybe it was that academia and education wasn't for them, but that for me nails what it is that school can provide that is more than just a score. And look, kudos to those people for getting their firsts. It's an incredible achievement, but I think there's so much more that we can learn throughout the education system that is so vital to us as we move into the real world. And I think that I struggled when I moved to Australia with this concept of we have to know where our kids are going to go to school and we have to get them down on lists so early, because I'm like, she's 6 months old. I don't have a clue what she's going to be like.
It is a big thing. I hear it all the time in this community, especially about lists and names down. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and you just want to keep as many opportunities and doors open, right? So again, we just wanted to learn a bit about our kids and then learn 12 years later what the school is like in that situation, and is there a match there for them to thrive both socially and academically. So for me, I love the name more than a score, because education is just so much more than a score for me.
Well, Tom, you've absolutely nailed the talking and the listening today. So it's almost like you do communication for a living. It's been an absolute privilege having you on. Thank you very much for joining us on More Than a Score.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Thanks so much for having me, and absolutely awesome work, you guys. Thank you.
Go team.
That's good.
You.
Thanks, Tom.
Good on you, Tom.
Thank you.